Well, again, welcome everybody. My name is Chris McLeod. I'm the director of OLLI, and it's my pleasure today to introduce Shelley Bleisweiss, who is one of our most beloved OLLI instructors. He has taught for us the last 5 years. He is the child of 2 Polish Holocaust survivors, and he's been a Holocaust educator for the past 20 years, during which he's spoken to hundreds of public school students and numerous community, civic, and faith communities about the Holocaust and anti-Semitism. He is currently a member of the North Carolina Council on the Holocaust, and he's been a great part to us in arranging this event. I do want to give a shout out to Chuck Berlin, who has worked extensively in researching and arranging this event for us. This is only our 2nd lecture to be publicized on the Duke event calendar. So Shelley, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you introduce our guest speaker.
Thank you, Chris. This is not my presentation. So it's my privilege and honor to introduce our speaker, Aleisa Fishman from the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. Aleisa grew up in Charlotte and as a graduate of Duke University. She was a member of the museum's founding staff and developed or worked on a podcast series for 10 years called Voices on Anti-Semitism. She can tell you more about what she does in the museum, but she is right now has had a variety of positions at the museum, is currently facilitating education abroad, especially in the Middle East and Europe. So without further ado, Aleisa, I turn it over to you. And I will say, by the way, folks, if you have questions or comments, please send them in through chat. I will do my best to monitor those, and there will be time afterwards for questions and comments that we'll try to answer. So again, Aleisa, be my guest.
Thank you so much, Shelley. Thank you, Chris. I am going to try to share my screen, which I have had practice at, but let's just make sure this works. Okay. You can see it, right? I'm looking
Yes, looks good.
Okay. Beverly's telling me. All right, very good. Okay, terrific. Hi, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be with you this afternoon. I had a great experience at Duke, and I'm excited to be able to share the work of the museum with you today. So I was going to ask a participatory question, but I realized I can't actually see all of you. Let's see if I make a change. No, that doesn't really work. Okay, I was going to see how many of you have been at the museum. This is the problem with the online effort. So I can't see all of you. I can't even see, unfortunately, if you're raising your hand. So maybe Shelley can keep, there we go.
I changed it for you.
Some people are putting a little hands up. If you know how to do it, that's great. Thank you so much. I know that quite a number of you probably have been. So yeah, this is the drawback of online, but nonetheless, thank you so much for raising your hands. So I want to tell you a little bit about the museum and how it came into being, and the architecture and the work that we do. Some of you may know some of this, some of you may not, and then talk a little bit about the work that my department specifically does that I do. And as Shelley said, it's working in, I mostly work in Europe. So again, I apologize if some of you know this, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you something about the museum. Okay, let's see if I can get my, there we go. Okay, so the museum was established, chartered by a unanimous act of Congress in 1980 after the recommendations of the 1979 President's Commission on the Holocaust. And this is a copy of the volume. It's just the front page. And this had been established by President Jimmy Carter in November of 1978. And the commission was charged with submitting a report, quote, with respect to the establishment and maintenance of an appropriate memorial to those who perished in the Holocaust. And this commission was chaired by Elie Wiesel. You can see President Carter here. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but this is President Carter, Elie Wiesel just to his left, and this is Ben and Vladka Mead, who were also on the council. So the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum is America's national institution for the documentation, study, and interpretation of Holocaust history. and serves as this country's memorial to the millions of people murdered during the Holocaust. The museum's primary mission is to advance and disseminate knowledge about this unprecedented tragedy, to preserve the memory of those who suffered, and to encourage its visitors to reflect upon the moral and spiritual questions raised by the events of the Holocaust, as well as their own responsibilities as citizens of a democracy. So obviously from the title of the museum, you can also get a sense of what it is that we were tasked to do. It's not just a museum telling the history, and it's not just a memorial, United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. So it's those two main pieces. And so, as I said, we strive to be an educational institution that endures also as a living memorial to the victims of the Holocaust. In general, we work to confront hatred, prevent genocide, and promote human dignity. So in terms of the architecture of the building, the US government gave us the land if we raised the funds to build the building. And so the architect of the building was James Ingo Fried of the firm Paycob Fried. And he fled Germany in 1933. We would consider him a survivor. And he was the designer, the architect of the building. As he went about coming up with a design, he went back to Europe to look for inspiration. And there are many echoes of that time in the architecture. So you can see this here is one of his early drawings. So those of you who've been to the museum, you know this spot. This is the Hall of Witness. And I wanted to just tell you a little bit about the architecture and some of the meaning behind certain elements. So I'm not sure how well you can tell in this particular photo, but above the roof here, the glass roof, and on both sides, it looks a little bit like towers, right? And so these are supposed to be reminiscent of towers at the guard towers at the concentration camps. Another element is the ceiling itself, this roof, which is made up of glass panels. And the whole roof is kind of torquing, I should say. Each glass panel is individually made. None of them are the same size. And you can kind of see that if you look sort of in the middle of the frame. Those are much smaller than the ones near the top right corner. So you can see this warped ceiling is to evoke the idea of German society being worked at that time. In addition, there are some glass blocks across the bottom. I don't know whether you can see this. There's a woman in white here and a gentleman wearing shorts. Here, this is also bisecting the building again to evoke that idea of society, not necessarily ripping apart, but being divided. In addition, he used basic building blocks, brick and glass and steel as he did that. And as he designed the building, you can see very clearly it's brick all around, glass on the ceiling, a lot of steel, trying to use these basic building blocks. In addition, let me just go to the next slide. You can see a little bit better here. The brick has these sort of decorative, I guess you could call them, elements of the steel into the brick. And that is to evoke the bands of steel that had to go around the crematoria chimneys, which, because they were firing so frequently, began to crumble and disintegrate. So there's a lot of echoes in the building itself. I'm just going to go back to this image here because I want to point out one more thing, which is this main staircase, I should say, staircase. And that again is supposed to evoke this very well-known photograph of the railroad tracks into Auschwitz, where it's that perspective of the tracks leading off into the distance. And one last thing, which is kind of, I guess, maybe a little bit inside information. He did not want there to be any signage, no directional signage, bathrooms are downstairs or where to go for things. He wanted people to have to figure them out. Ultimately, because the museum has so many visitors, that just was not practical. So there's now some signage here. I'm not sure you can see just at the base of the stairwell. And in fact, we weren't sure anybody was going to come to the museum. What I think I'm not sure I actually said that oh yeah, Shelley said that I was part of the founding staff, so I was part of the team that worked on the exhibition itself. And, you know, before we opened, we weren't really sure anybody was going to come. So, so that has been an eye-opening experience over the last 30 years that people definitely are interested in the subject. So then I want to talk a little bit about the exhibitions. This here is from our permanent exhibition. As I'm sure you know, we have a main exhibition, the permanent exhibition, and several others, which I'll talk about in just a moment. One of the big issues, for those of you maybe who remember years ago, the question was, why do we need this museum in the United States? Not, you know, it didn't happen here, fortunately, the Holocaust, but why is it relevant here? And so one of the things that we wanted to do was to make it relevant for visitors in the United States to see that it was relevant. And the way we did that in part is through the very first element you encounter when you come into the museum, when you come into the permanent exhibition, I should say. And for those of you who haven't been, you enter through an elevator that takes you up to the 4th floor, and then you wind your way down chronologically from the 4th to the 3rd to the 2nd floor. And the first thing that you encounter when you come into this elevator is the monitor up against the wall, which is a short clip of a American GI talking about what he saw when he encountered the camps for the first time. So this is, again, taking this perspective of the American sort of engagement with the Holocaust from years ago, and again, making it relevant for the audience. And so we start with liberation in the elevator, and then when you get off the elevator, it starts in well, a little bit before 1933 with the world before the Holocaust. So that's one element of how we make it relevant. Another one is the identification cards, and those of you who've been there, again, have seen these. The number 6 million is a pretty overwhelming number to try and get your head around. So again, we wanted to make it a little more understandable for visitors and to feel a little bit more connection to it, to understand what maybe an individual experienced on some level. Obviously, would never know exactly what somebody experienced. And these are all the histories of individuals who lived during that time. Some of them survive and some of them do not. The text on each page corresponds with the floor of the exhibition. So it, again, draws you in perhaps a little bit more to this history when you're overwhelmed by all the details, which is easy to have happen. In addition, there are a number of artifacts. Again, those of you who've been there know that. One of the ones that is extremely compelling we hear from visitors is the shoes, which were taken from victims. They came from the concentration camp in Majdanek outside of Lublin. And these have, since we opened, been one of the key elements that people remember from the exhibit. I think in part, you know, we all wear shoes. And they're very recognizable. They still, because they continue to deteriorate just as things do, still give off a bit of a smell. And so that's, you know, a little bit unusual for an exhibition. So those are some of the elements of our main exhibition and how we try to help the audience make a connection to the history. There are 3 other exhibits in our museum right now. Another one that has been there since the beginning, is permanent, is Daniel's story, Remember the Children. And this exhibit is geared towards young people aged 8 to 11, although you don't have to only be 8 to 11 to see it. I've known many adults who go through it and find it extremely moving. Because we recommend the main exhibit, the permanent exhibition, for young people over the age of 11. That's our recommendation. Obviously, we don't ask anybody's age. You can bring in your child, grandchild, cousin, whoever you want, if you feel that is appropriate for them. I, in fact, had a friend whose daughter was about 8, and she had a lot of experience and read a lot of history, and she felt it was appropriate for her. So she brought her in there. Anyway, we have this exhibition, which is pretty interesting in terms of how we developed it, because we did a lot of testing with young people to see how they would respond. It's a pretty intense topic, I mean, as you all know, and we wanted to make sure that we were sensitive to the young people who would come through that exhibition. And one of the things they found, which again I thought was so interesting, is that young people were able to handle it a little bit better if they couldn't identify Daniel as an actual face, right? So the story of Daniel is a composite. It's not, there was no actual child Daniel whose story we're telling. So if you see Daniel in the exhibition anywhere, he's with his soccer team, or his back is to you in the picture, the representation of Daniel. So that made it a little bit easier for young people to absorb the content, to absorb the history and understand what was happening. So this is just one of the images from that exhibition. Right now we have a special exhibition, I should say, called Americans in the Holocaust. This is our special exhibition space. So we've had a number of different exhibitions over the years in this space, and maybe some of you have had a chance to see this one. This we are really proud of. Obviously, we're proud of all of them, but this one is about what did Americans know and when did they know it? So we really wanted to talk about, oh, you can see actually right here, what did they know and what could have been done here along the left-hand side of this image. Because we really felt it was important to talk about how Americans responded at the time. And there's a lot of really interesting information in there. One in particular that I find interesting is there were a lot of public opinion polls at the time about whether America should allow refugees in. And it's interesting to see how people responded. People were not open to it. And you probably know this, many of you, but that's a very interesting element to see. In addition, we have a piece, it's a large screen, almost the whole wall, and it's a map of the United States, and you can touch it and look at articles from that state, newspaper articles from that state that reported on elements of this history. So we had a whole project, which we called History Unfolded, as if you unfold a newspaper. Excuse me. So young people could, through their classroom and outside of their classroom, in fact, could look for local news articles from that period and contribute those to this effort, which eventually went into the exhibition. So that's a pretty cool thing. I'm always trying to convince people to become historians. I'm completely non-biased about that. Okay, so let me go on to the next exhibition. We have another one, also a special exhibition about called Burma's Path to Genocide. So this is about in Burma or Myanmar and how the Rohingya are being pushed out. So this is a contemporary issue. You know, the museum is very interested and concerned about these kinds of issues. It's part of our mandate from the very beginning. And I will talk about that in just a moment, actually. So this is another exhibition that we have. We've had a number of contemporary exhibitions focused on Rwanda, related to Syria, one on Cambodia. So, so we're obviously very concerned about these contemporary issues as well. So as I hinted sort of earlier and through some of what I've said so far, the museum is actually more than a museum. So that's really my point, is it's more than just a museum. We have a huge collections department. We in fact have a large facility outside of Washington, DC, where we have, you know, our artifacts and film, photographs, documents, all kinds of elements relating to the Holocaust. So we have a big collections department that focuses on creating the collection of record around the Holocaust. So we encourage people who have artifacts to send them to us. Well, contact us first, not just send them. And we collect archival material from around the world that's relevant, in part for scholars, as you can see in this image, to use, but also for our exhibitions and for loaning to other people, I should say. So in addition to the big collections department, we have a big research center. So these are sort of the main pieces of the museum. we collect things, we do a lot of academic research. So we're in we're working to develop the field of research. So we want to encourage scholars and scholarship in this field. We do publications. So these are a couple of scholars here working in the archive and library. In addition, we have a huge education department, not surprisingly. So our exhibitions department falls into this section as well. This is my colleague, Christina Chavarria, who actually used to work in Houston. Shelley, maybe you know her. I think she knows you. So we have a big education department, and this is the department I'm in. I'll come back to that in one second. But we also have a program on genocide prevention. So this is the department that works on contemporary issues. And as I said, this has been an element of the exhibit of the museum's mission from the very beginning. Because you know, it's important to learn history, but if we don't use that today and don't think about that today, then that's not really affecting change or being wise from what we know. So that department works on these contemporary issues, and I named several. They're very involved in a number of different ones. So now I would like to take some time to talk about Holocaust education. Again, this is the department that I'm in. So our educational division works to support teaching and learning about how and why the Holocaust happened, and to inspire critical thinking. So we feel it's really important that young people, well, anybody who's learning about the Holocaust, really understand the how and why. That's really the key elements that we want people to understand. And we also want people to be able to think critically. You know, that makes for a wise populace, and also it's an important element of a democracy. And we do that in a couple of ways. This is a little echo of what I said before, but we're looking for, we're encouraging people, and we're looking to help people find points of connection and points of relevance in this history. So for example, we work with a lot of professions. So the police department, we work with lawyers, we work with judges, we work with all kinds of different groups. The DC police recruits come to us from the counties nearby as well. Excuse me, this happens every year. And, you know, sometimes they come to the museum and they think, well, what does this have to do with me? You know, like, I'm a policeman, I do my job, like, this is the Holocaust. I don't know that I really need to know that, you know. So one of the things that we find is, you know, having this relevance encourages people to ask more questions about the history, to engage in it a little bit more. And the way we do that is by talking, in this case, with the police about what German police, and in other countries too, but what the German police did at that time, how they were involved in what happened during the Holocaust, how they contributed. And so this kind of connection, where it has this personal relevance, we find is a very important element in engaging people to achieve our educational goals. A second one is the term we use is disequilibrium, right? So we want people to, you know, come across something that maybe they didn't expect. You know, I mean, if you think about what the word means in your own experiences, you know, you find out about something and you think, well, I didn't think that was going to be right. I didn't think that was the answer. I was surprised that this happened. And so that's, again, what happens even with the police, right? They think they're coming for something in particular. They think they're going to hear something specific, maybe a boring history, and then they find something they didn't quite expect. So we try to find moments like that, again, to engage people. So my department, here's a slide about my department. My department is, as I said, within this general educational division of the museum. And my department is called International Educational Outreach. And so, not surprisingly, we do education abroad. And we work in three main areas. So we work in Europe to confront influential Holocaust distortion. We work in the Middle East, North Africa region, or the MENA region, to normalize Holocaust discourse. And here we've worked primarily in Tunisia, Morocco, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Iran. And then we also have a global reach, global goal, which is to establish the global relevance of the Holocaust. And we do this through partnerships. Actually, most of our work is with partnerships, but partnerships with institutions like the United Nations, with UNESCO, and even with the US State Department, who bring groups of professionals from abroad to the museum, to the United States actually, but also to the museum. So I work on Europe, as I said, where specifically around our exhibitions. And we've brought 2 exhibitions to Europe and learned a lot in the process. Both exhibitions started as special exhibitions in our museum. Perhaps some of you saw them when they were on display. They are State of Deception. It's about Nazi propaganda, and Some Were Neighbors, which is about ordinary people during the Holocaust. So I'll tell you about both and how we used them. So State of Deception, as I said, overall is about how the Nazis used propaganda to mobilize people for their cause. In 2017, in collaboration with the United Nations, we created a 16 poster set of material from the original exhibition. And this 16 poster set, each one is about 2 feet by 3 feet. So it's very easy to move and to set up. It doesn't have any artifacts, so you don't need climate controlled cases. It's very easy to put up, it's very flexible. And we found that partners liked the format and found it very useful. So the exhibit itself is organized into 4 sections. This is a little bit more about propaganda. So the first one is to win broad voter support in Germany's young democracy after World War I, to implement racial programs under the party's dictatorship in the 1930s, to justify war and mass murder, which is kind of hard to justify. And then the 4th is about post-war trials and Nazi propagandists on trial in Nuremberg. So, whoops, I jumped ahead. The poster series and the accompanying lesson plan for teachers emphasizes why the issue of propaganda matters and challenges citizens to actively question, analyze, and seek the truth. And it was on display here. You can see this is it, the poster. It's a big poster advertising the exhibit when it was in the City Hall in Paris. It was in Paris, Strasbourg, Marseille, Brussels. This is the Museum of the European Union, also in Luxembourg and in Wrocław, Poland, as well as in the Middle East in several cities in Tunisia. And as I said, we partnered with the United Nations, specifically their outreach program on the Holocaust, to make the poster set available to their UN information centers around the world on the occasion of International Holocaust Remembrance Day, which is January 27th. And through that partnership, State of Deception has been displayed in 40 countries. Now, in addition to teaching people about Nazi propaganda, another goal of the exhibition was to help increase media literacy, right? So if you're going to understand propaganda, you need to understand how it all works and how the media works. And we did that in order to help people be better consumers of media today, right? Often we don't really see the subtle messages of propaganda until someone points it out. And I know I certainly didn't. So I don't know how many of you are Duke grads. I know this is a Duke program, but I remember my very first women's studies class at Duke with Jean O'Barr, and how I started to learn about propaganda and the messages that were coming at me about who I was supposed to be as a young woman, what I was supposed to wear, how I was supposed to put on makeup, or whatever it was that I was supposed to do. So anyway, so that was my my mind-opening, media-opening understanding. So one of the things that we did, as I said, in addition to this exhibition, is we created a website, which we called Mind Over Media, in order to have a place where students, teachers, the general public could go and upload propaganda and discuss it and analyze it, right? And propaganda is all over the place. It could be, you know, drink more water, or it could be vote for this candidate. So the examples are in a variety of languages, and they range from being beneficial to harmful. So I'm just going to show you a few slides from this. And so it gives some guidance for people to understand how to recognize propaganda. You can see here that how it It appears in a variety of forms. I'll just read them in case you have any trouble seeing it. So it activates strong emotions. It's responding to audience needs and values, simplifying information and ideas, and attacking opponents. So those are some elements of propaganda. And then the question is it beneficial or harmful? You have to think through, what are the elements here, to analyze whether or not it fits into one side or the other. So you want to look at the message, you want to look at the techniques. How is it being disseminated to you? What are the strategies and the symbols used? The environment and context. Where do you come across this bit of propaganda? The means of communication. How does it get to you? Is it a text message? Is it an image? And then also audience receptivity. How free are people to hear this message and take it in? Okay, so here's some examples from the website. Now, some of you probably have a cup of Starbucks on your desk somewhere. And so here you see how it works. So it's saying the best coffee for the best you. And you can see at the bottom, you can rate this from beneficial, benign would be in the middle, to harmful. And then this is how it was ranked in the website. So mostly benign is what people are saying. Here's another one. This is for a vape pen, I believe is what it is. So better than smoking is basically what it's telling you. And let's see how people responded. Basically, people still thought this was harmful. Okay, so then as related to that, so I'll give you some URLs at the end so you can take a look yourself if you're interested. But in addition, we do have this State of Deception exhibition available online to look at. It's not exactly the same as the poster set, but it's the same concepts. And it has just been revised by the curator who created it. So here is, you can take a look at that. Again, I'll provide this URL later. So the next exhibit I want to talk about is the other one, as I said, which is called Some Were Neighbors. This is the image from when it was at the museum. And again, it was a special exhibition. It was the most recent one before the current one on Americans was at our museum 2013 to 2017. And again, based on interest and feedback from international audiences and partners, we decided to create, in this case, a 22 panel version, and again, in collaboration with the UN. So this exhibit focuses on the choices of ordinary people during the Holocaust. Hitler and other Nazi leaders did not perpetrate the Holocaust alone. So Some Were Neighbors uses case studies from across Europe to show that ordinary people contributed to those events, making a wide variety of choices with a myriad of motivations. And as Holocaust distortion has become more pronounced, we began to see that the exhibition could be useful to address this Holocaust distortion. So in this context of assaults in Europe on Holocaust memory, which we're seeing, and the re-energizing of simplistic Holocaust narratives, this one that it's just Hitler's responsibility, we saw that people connected responsibility, as I said, to Hitler and his leadership, and just to them. And that is a problem. This perspective skews an understanding of how and why the Holocaust happened. So we've been showing the exhibition in Germany since 2019. This is it on display in the German Bundestag, in the German parliament. And we've also been showing it in Poland for the last year. So I'm going to try to show a clip. Shelley, you'll tell me if this doesn't work. I'm just going to show a little clip here from a video, a short video that the Bundestag made, because it nicely summarizes why they found this exhibit important. All right, let's see.
You're good.
Some were neighbors. What made ordinary people become complicit in the Holocaust? How were the top figures of the Nazi regime able to rely on an army of nameless faces that made the deadly persecution of Jewish people in Germany and Europe possible in the first place? When neighbors looked on but did nothing, tolerating silently and supporting the unfathomable. The exhibition of the same name from the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum investigates these questions. The first stop of the exhibition's tour is the German Bundestag. In the Paul-Löbe building, Bundestag President Wolfgang Schäuble had words of warning at the opening of the exhibition. Most Germans, if they had been asked in 1945, would probably have described themselves as decent. There hardly was an awareness of their personal responsibility for what happened, and even less so, an expression of remorse. Many Germans at the time were able to salve their conscience by pinning the blame for war and genocide, for the total political, economic and moral collapse of their country, solely on the National Socialist leaders.
Okay, I just wanted to play a short clip of that so you can see, why Germans were interested in showing this exhibit that came from the United States there. And the goal for us in Germany is to create effective models of Holocaust education for young people about the behaviors, roles, and responsibilities of ordinary people in the Holocaust. We're not interested in just showing the exhibition. We want to have this educational work and educational learning for ourselves and for our partners as a component of the project. So the museum sought out a diverse set of partners across Germany who were interested in working with us in this effort. And to create something that would resonate locally on the ground. We have people who speak German, we have people who work with us who live in Germany, but we don't know exactly what is going to work with the students on the ground. So we have to partner with other venues and institutions. So this map shows you the places where we displayed the exhibition so far. We've worked with more than 40 partners in 11 German states. There are 16 German states, so this is pretty good. Our partners include city halls, German NGOs, memorials, libraries, museums and universities, state parliaments, and even the headquarters of the German police. Partnerships with German institutions were essential to the project, as together we were able to explore opportunities for mutual learning and for developing larger questions. Now, I was talking earlier about participatory learning. This is one of our key elements in this. We really want the students to find, to begin to ask their own questions, to formulate their own questions, to think about what they would like to learn more about. And so we do that in a variety of ways and different activities. So one is working with students on photo analysis. So you can see here, this is one of the posters in a roll-up form in German, and the students are here having a discussion about that. They also examine a clip from a historical film and analyze that. That's what's happening here in this image. And then we also do a workshop where the students walk through the exhibition and they decide for themselves which posters they really want to learn more about, what questions they have themselves. In addition to all of this, the exhibit has what we call floor panels. There are 4 of them, and you can see here on the bottom, these are 2 of them on display in this particular image. And these panels repeat questions that are already in the exhibit, in the poster that's up above them, in order to encourage visitors to consider these questions. And what's so interesting to us is we've never done this before, but it was a suggestion of one of my colleagues. The students didn't like them at all. They just did not like them. They didn't know what to do with them. They didn't know if they were supposed to stand on them. They wanted to know who was going to answer the questions. And yes, of course, they could stand on them. But they're supposed to try to answer the questions. These are questions we want people to think about. So the 4 floor panels say, how was the Holocaust possible? Who benefited? Should I take the risk to help? And why didn't more people help the Jews? So these are the broad questions that we want students to think about, actually anyone visiting it to think about. Now, one of the things we did also to help facilitate all of this is that the museum team continues to work, I should say, with venues to make the educators and facilitators familiar with the education plan and to strengthen their abilities. We modeled this participatory learning and gave participants opportunities to practice and to become confident with that method. So you can see here's some facilitators and educators working here on the left. This is in Munster, and on the right happens to be in Leipzig. You can see they're workshopping some of the ideas. Now, another thing that we learned is that the local matters when teaching about the Holocaust. We learned from our partners that including local history in the program really resonated with audiences. Combining a visit to the exhibition with a visit to historical sites in the immediate vicinity allowed participants to unpack the implications of what happened in their own town or village. At each location, museum staff and venue facilitators together, adapted the exhibition's educational material to best suit local circumstances. As a result, the museum and venue partners became joint stakeholders in developing an approach tailored to the local audience. So this is an image from Munster. You can see this quote here. And then this is an image of students visiting a local site. And I just want to read one more quote. We heard from students that they were surprised, in fact, to learn events in the Holocaust occurred where they live. So here's the quote: "Everything happened near here, and that really was a blow. You know, you stand on a ground and something bad has happened here exactly, and not far away in Berlin, but exactly here." So I found that really powerful. So I'm going to switch to Poland here and say a few words about this. As in Germany, the museum has many important partners in Poland. The situation in Poland is somewhat different from Germany. Distortion of a Holocaust history in Poland, especially surrounding the issue of responsibility for the Holocaust, has become highly politicized, especially in the country's public discourse. And so the question for us became how to introduce a somewhat non-standard narrative. So as with all of our projects, we did some careful planning, which included many conversations with and a lot of listening to our Polish academic, civic, cultural, and educational colleagues. So in Poland, we focus a lot on choice and the choices ordinary people made during the Holocaust. We wanted to move beyond the usual places where you'd see a Holocaust exhibition. Actually, it's true also that goal in Germany as well. But in Poland, our partners wanted to be sure the exhibit wasn't perceived as partisan. So we went and are going to different types of venues. Similar to Germany, we are in libraries, museums, cathedrals, outside, and to cities governed by different political parties in order to expand the reach of the exhibition. So here are some examples. This is at Outside in Warsaw. For any of you who have been there and know where it is, it's across the street from the Bristol Hotel. This is in the public library in Oświęcim. So Oświęcim is the Polish name for the town where the camp of Auschwitz is very close by. This is a cultural center in Otwock, which is a small town outside of Warsaw. This is in the Cathedral of Łódź. We're very excited that this was able to happen. The Archbishop of Łódź actually spoke at the opening, so we were very excited that he was able to participate. And this is an arts center in Sosnowiec. The exhibit is scheduled to travel through Poland for at least the next year. So I think I have a couple of minutes. Shelley, should I go ahead and say a few words about myself, or which I can do? I'm going to stop sharing actually, since I can make that work. Yes. Shelley had asked me to say a few words about myself. I can do that now, or I can do that in response to a question.
Go ahead and do that now.
Okay.
And, you know, yeah.
Okay, very good. So I have been at the museum for 31 years. I usually make the joke that I've been here since I was like 5 or 2 or something, but now I'm just over 30. So what are you going to do? I started as a research assistant on the permanent exhibition. So I got to see how all of that was put together. I give a very specific tour of the PE, which is like, I did this and I did this. Really only my parents are interested in that tour, but let me know if you are. And what's kind of interesting sometimes for people to know is that I initially didn't want to learn anything about the Holocaust as a child. I was afraid of it. I didn't want to read any books. I've actually never read the Diary of Anne Frank. All four of my grandparents were born in the United States, so I didn't know of any relatives who had perished because of the Holocaust until about 10 years ago or so, when I learned that my maternal great-grandmother's 3 brothers had perished in Hungary. I have a PhD in history. I also didn't like history as a kid. I thought it was just memorizing dates and facts. And but I did a study abroad program in Vienna, Austria, as part of my Duke experience. So a big shout out to Paul Bryan, who was the Wind Symphony director, if any of you know him. And I discovered then really how interesting history is. So I switched majors, in fact, from math to history. And we went to Mauthausen while we were there, which is a concentration camp outside of Vienna. And I began to be interested in the Holocaust. So I've had several different positions at the museum. I still feel like I'm growing and learning and contributing, so I stay. So thank you all so much. I hope this has been interesting, and I look forward to your questions.
Okay, well, we've got a few who have come in, and I'm going to not address them necessarily in order, but since you just recently talked about the Germans in Germany, the question that came from someone that said, do you find any difference between reactions or knowledge between students from areas of Germany who were from the area formerly in East Germany and West Germany? So are there differences between those folks coming from those two different areas?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking that. That's one of the things we were really interested in seeing. What is interesting, and in fact, I just found this out this week, is we are seeing some difference, or let me say this differently. We are hearing from educators that they're struggling in some cases with students who are actively denying the Holocaust. And this is what we're hearing from some of our partners in the former East Germany. Now, this is, I mean, extremely general. So, you know, this is not everyone, but that legacy of communism does have an impact, you know. So, and I'm not saying it's just because of communism that people deny the Holocaust, but that lasted a long, long time, the communist era. And so there's a lot of attention to that, a lot of difficulty around that and the impact of that over the years. So we are finding some difference in terms of knowledge, and also in terms of this issue of denial, right? So the Alternative for Deutschland party, the Alternative for Germany party, is strong, somewhat stronger in the East than in the West. It exists in both, so I'm not saying it's only in the East, but we are seeing some differences that we are paying attention to.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, can I just add one more quick thing? Sorry, I should have said this.
No, it's your presentation, you go for it.
We also are doing, I should say, we've hired an evaluation firm in order to, I see this question coming up about research, but we hired an evaluation firm to help us learn more about what students are taking away from it. And so it's not just our perspective, right? So in fact, they've they're working at a 5th now venue that has used this educational material in order to understand better what students are coming to it with, what they're coming away from it with, how it works. So I should just add that. We don't have all the results yet, though.
Okay. There was a question about efforts in the Middle East, and you didn't say anything about it. I know that's in your purview, right? So how have the education efforts been in the Middle East, and how have they been received?
That's also a great question. I almost included an image. We showed our State of Deception exhibition in Tunisia at the Tunisian National Library. And, you know, people came to see it, but there are some issues sometimes, you know, in the Middle East. Holocaust denial and anti-Semitism is promoted even by the state. And that's a difficult thing to push back against. So we're trying a number of different ways. As I said, we had the exhibit up. We've done workshops with students and professors in Morocco and Tunisia. We also just recently, and this was the slide I was going to include, we just recently, for International Holocaust Remembrance Day, did a program in the UAE and in Cairo, where we brought one of our Holocaust survivor volunteers from the museum. She's 92 years old. And Ruth Cohen, in case you happen to know who she is, you could probably find her on our website, but she came and spoke at programs that we organized with our partners there in order to make this topic something that people actually discuss in a way that is legitimate, you know, that it is a topic of discussion, not just you dismiss it out of hand.
You mentioned something, and a couple other questions, but I want to grab this one while it's hot. How have survivors reacted to your efforts going into Poland, Germany, and some of those European countries? What has been their reaction? If you can speak to that in general, you know, I'm assuming varied, but.
You know, as far as I know, I have to say that I think we've not really had a negative reaction. You mean our survivors that work with us here in the United States, or survivors in general? But I guess
I would say both. You know, I would say any survivors, because I know there's survivors in Europe, but you know, I'm curious how they're reacting. If you're getting any pushback from them, whether here or there, or are they saying go for it?
We really are not. We really are not. We many years ago, before the museum opened, there was pushback. There were survivors. I just had a conversation with somebody the other day about this. There were survivors who did not think we should have a museum in the United States, did not think it was a good idea. And the person we were talking about is now a survivor volunteer at the museum. So over time, her thinking about it changed. We have really, I have to say, we've really not had any pushback as far as I'm aware. The museum is known for being very much rooted in the history, for being very deliberate, very thoughtful about how we go about our work. So I'm not aware of really any sort of significant pushback in a long time.
Okay. What are some of the areas of research that are currently being done in the archives or?
Oh gosh, all kinds of stuff.
You don't have to tell all.
I'm trying to think. I mean, we really encourage. I wish I had something like really exciting, specific that I could tell you, but I haven't. I'm not totally up on that. But so I'll answer this in two ways. One, I know that we try to encourage scholars to apply for fellowships. We have a huge fellowship program, so people come from all over the world. And this is the second part of my answer, which is if you go to our website and look up fellowships, you should be able to find who are the current fellows. There's usually a biography of them, so you can get a sense really in real time of those of what those projects are. But I will say in general, we want scholars to come from different fields. We had an architecture scholar come at one point. We've had philosophers. We've had people who look at the work the museum does, like how do you build a Holocaust museum? We've had people looking at different elements from around the world, you know, looking at Ukraine or at Romania, or, you know, how the Holocaust is important for Cambodians, like all kinds of stuff. We're really trying to encourage the field of Holocaust history and encourage new scholarship and new scholars to come into it.
Okay, thank you. A couple of questions have come up, and I'm going to kind of add to it in terms of your interactions with other museums and other Holocaust museums. And somebody asked if you know, Germany is it true that Germany requires all students to receive Holocaust education? And I know that we've had that, you know, in this country we're looking at too. And I know for people that they may not know this, that the state of North Carolina will be mandating Holocaust education in the public school system beginning in the school year 2023. And I know that we're working very closely with the museum on that. But if you want to speak to, because one of the questions I had also to ask was, what does the museum do in terms of helping to train teachers besides the wonderful website you have, which I use quite often in my classes? But I don't know if you want to address that issue about the Holocaust mandatory education and the role that the museum is playing in that.
Yeah,
I know
yeah.
that's a lot that, you know.
No, it's okay. I have a pen, so I wrote it down. So we certainly work with, you know, any institution that wants to work with us. We have a very close relationship with Yad Vashem, with the other institutions in the United States. We've worked with, I should say, Holocaust institutions around the world, you know, who borrow material from us, or we work with in terms of holding academic conferences. We do this a lot in Europe. We do it in South America, in Asia. Actually, I went to China for a conference related to the Holocaust, and across the United States. So we certainly do that. I mentioned the Holocaust Museum in Houston earlier. We also work with the organization called, it's called the AHO, American Holocaust Organization. So it's often sort of smaller museums. We're enormous, and some of them are enormous, but we also work with them and provide resources and teaching tools for that. We run a number of programs for teachers. We do a lot of what do I call this? Programs for teachers. There are a number of different ones that you can do. One is called the Belfer program. It's named after this family Belfer who helped fund it. And we've been doing this during the pandemic online, which has actually been a tremendous boon in a way, because before we could only have so many teachers come to the museum, and now they're able to attend online. So we've had, I don't know, like 10 times as many people come to that. And a lot of that material is I believe, online as well. I do feel like I kind of need to apologize for a website, which is enormous and a little hard sometimes to navigate. So if there's something you really can't find, you can reach out and I'll see what I can do. There was also this one question about Germany requiring Holocaust education. I have to admit, I don't know for sure. We, as part of this project, we have several people in the United States working on it, and then a couple of people in Europe. So we have a close colleague who lives in Berlin, and so he, you know, provides that perspective for us. And our educator actually lives in Austria. So both of them speak German. They understand what's on the ground. But I have to admit, I don't actually know for sure if it's required, and I don't want to tell you the wrong thing.
Yeah,
I will look it up.
I don't know that answer either. And, you know, we are just encouraging more questions to come in. And what people may not be aware is that I was a docent at the Holocaust Museum in Houston, and much of what you described in terms of the development of the Washington Museum was done in Houston. The same architect did the Houston Museum, and we offer guided tours in the Houston Museum, which is a tad bit different. But has the same concept of going from the freedom of before to the constriction of going through the camps and the deportations and all that, and then coming out into more daylight and things. So it is an experience to do that. Somebody wanted to know if you have a relative in Charlotte. Let me see if I can get that message again. Now my thing's not working.
I am
Jackie Fishman.
Jackie Fishman. Thank you.
I do know her. She is not related, but I knew her mom, Susan Cherniak. So Jackie was, I went to East Mecklenburg High School, where I know she taught, I think she taught art, if I'm not wrong. But I do know who she is, and I knew her mom. In fact, because my dad used to teach philosophy at UNCC. He's retired now. And her mom, Susan Cherniak, taught German. So I am not related to her, but if you know anybody else who went to Temple Israel, they might know me. I haven't been back for a little while.
Have I think you mentioned something about some of the denial in Europe. Have you guys had that issue in Washington at the museum? Deniers coming through, or any actually, and I want to know, any protests going on in front of the museum or with the museum? There may be two different questions, but
no, it's okay. It's okay. We so the museum has a lot of security, probably not surprising, and we have the whole time. It's not changed. We've had it for many, many years. I mean, since we opened. I don't have a key, for example, to my office. I just show my badge. So that's how it works. So they're very aware of who's around and, you know, what's happening, and they watch people and stuff like that. We have not really had a lot of protesters. We have had protesters, I should say. And again, we've been remote for 3 years, so I'm not quite sure what we've had for the last 3 years, but we did have some protesters related to issues of reproductive rights, you know, where they pull the Holocaust into that discussion, or around animal welfare, animal rights, treating animals, you know, how you treat animals. So that has been conflated sometimes with that, with the Holocaust. And so they protest outside. I mean, it's a public building. And they don't come inside usually. And I think they would be allowed inside. It's just those big banners, like that's dangerous for other people. So that is really the only one that I've seen.
Okay. Somebody commented that they were in Germany and were pleased to see a number of students in high school with their teachers at museums in Berlin and Frankfurt who were taking notes, and so obviously seem to be very engaged. What would you say is the biggest challenge having, you know, doing the exhibits that you are doing? What's the biggest challenge that you're finding in when you go into Germany and Poland and other places in Europe, especially the somewhere neighbors piece? I'm just like, whoa.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think the thing is the biggest difficulty is trying to open up the narrative, right? You know, certain narratives tend to take hold. I mean, it's not specific to Germany or Poland or France or Hungary or anybody else, but sometimes a kind of an idea of a national narrative takes hold, and to try to open that up and see that there are other ways of talking about it. So in Germany, for example, I'll just give you something concrete. In Germany, there has been, sometimes we see this narrative that everyone was afraid, right? And of course, certainly people were afraid, but that's not the only thing that happened, right? There were people who participated, who were not afraid, who were thrilled, right, who thought this was a great idea, right? There were other people who were opportunists, who said, you know, I really would love to have a shoe store, and these Jews are gone, so now I can take that shoe store, you know? So to try to open up that narrative beyond just something very simple, that's one thing. And also another thing for me that was kind of eye-opening, which just sounds kind of silly when I say it, but you know, when you live in the United States, most of the people that you meet around this topic are survivors or liberators, right? So they were either part of the American Army or they survived somehow. You don't come across too many perpetrators necessarily. I mean, obviously there have been some who were arrested.
No, they're hiding.
In Germany, it's a little more complicated, right? Because, you know, they're still survivors, there are perpetrators, there's some liberators probably, you know, people who are in the resistance or something, but it's a complicated, it's a complicated situation, you know, to open up that discussion for folks, and particularly when it's personal. I get that, it's difficult.
Yeah. We have a few more minutes. If anybody else has any questions they'd like to send in, because I think this has been very informative. I know that I think you kind of alluded to it, and I'm going to add that one of the things I've discovered, I teach classes, including at OLLI, and one of my best resources is the Memorial Museum. There's a wealth of information. And I always tell my students, anything you want to know about the Holocaust, go to USHMM.org and search it, and you will find it there. And there's some great information. I use that, and along with Yad Vashem as the other resource, but primarily the stuff that you all have at the museum in terms, you know, for educators and teachers and resources is just phenomenal over there.
You know, I'm sorry, go ahead. I just
No.
realized that I forgot to give you the resources. I was gonna put this back up, but I stopped my screen. So I'm just gonna put it into the chat. I think you can probably copy it down. Did I send it? Hold on. There we go. I sent it. Yay. You'd think
So
I've never been on Zoom before.
Well, the primarily, and I think that the USHMM.org is the gateway to getting into all the things that the museum has in terms of exhibits and resources and artifacts and videos and survivor testimony and all. And somebody's making a comment, and I think we might want to address it a little bit, that obviously the survivors are passing away, and we're not going to, a few more years, there will be no survivors. And it might be a little harder to fight the deniers. And this is something we are preparing for. And my answer is, I think so, by going to the next generation and letting the next generation tell their stories. But I think also recording the testimonies we're having from survivors. But I'll let you address that from the museum's perspective, Aleisa.
Yeah, I mean, this is a huge concern, obviously, for us. This is the way, unfortunately, life works. That people age. And so one of the ways that we're doing that is trying to, as you said, collect testimony and artifacts and objects and all of that, because, the Holocaust is really one of the most, if not the most, documented genocide of all time, and yet people still deny it. One of the interesting things, which maybe some of you have seen, is something the Shoah Foundation actually has done, where they, I'm trying to remember the guy's name, but they videotaped, I think, several people from a lot of different angles, and then you're able to ask them questions. The holographs. The holograph, exactly. So I'm trying to remember the guy's name, but it's escaping me. But it's very interesting to be able to engage with somebody. The museum, again, for those of you who haven't been, most days we have a Holocaust survivor on the main floor available to talk to. And that's a very powerful thing. So it's definitely a concern for all of us in this field.
They have one of those holographs at the Houston Museum, where you can interact with the survivor. And thank you, thankfully for the technology, I think we were able to do that. Somebody raised the question, has there been any involvement in Latin America?
Yeah, the guy's name is Pincus. I just remembered his name.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in fact, the museum, so I guess I could also say, we have our website is translated into like 20 different languages, not the whole website, but components of it. We have this huge Holocaust encyclopedia. And we have a lot in Spanish. That's the most popular language other than English. We work with a lot of Spanish speakers in the United States, a lot of Spanish speakers in Latin and South America. Last week, in fact, my department, this is the global piece, something we did with UNESCO, we ran something called the International Program on Holocaust and Genocide Education. I won't ask you to repeat that to me, but it was a big program, and we had participants from 11 different countries who came, where we are working with them to develop a program in their own country about Holocaust education and their own violent past in their country. So, for example, some of the countries participating include Cambodia, Brazil, Nigeria, Rwanda, Greece is part of it, Serbia, so a whole variety of Morocco, in fact, again, to try to encourage this global work. We have a number of colleagues who speak Spanish at the museum and who do a lot of outreach. My department does a little bit less in Latin America, but I've just named several things that we do.
Okay. I think I want to make a comment because somebody commented about egregious teaching of the Holocaust in schools. And I know that through teacher education, that's being worked on. And that's part of what we're doing in this state in terms of training teachers. And so it is that effort. We're more concerned. I think one of the concerns, especially when we mandate Holocaust education, like in North Carolina, are the teachers who have not been trained. How do we, we're trying to reach those teachers in some of the rural areas that don't necessarily get exposed to this. And we really want to minimize the egregious practices. I remember there was a story at the Holocaust Museum in Houston. We had a rail car, and I know you have one at the museum. And there was a teacher who took her students and put them all in one corner of the rail car, trying to replicate the conditions in the rail car, which of course you cannot do. And so we've tried to address those things, and we do the best we can in terms of teaching.
Yeah, I could just say a couple of words about that. I mean, you know, the museum provides educational training for teachers, as I've mentioned already, at all different levels, not just teachers in high school and junior high, but also at the academic, you know, the university level. So we run several programs for university professors who are either new to teaching about the Holocaust, you know, it's a new assignment, or they're new to the university, or whatever it is. We do that. I should also say that the US government has this, what they call the Never Again Act, I think is what it's called. So our museum is very involved in working on that. And I don't know all the details, but I know my colleagues are working very hard at helping to implement that act.
Yeah. All right. I don't see any more questions, and I think we're really coming close to the end. So personally, I want to say, Aleisa, this has been absolutely wonderful to hear. I have not made the opportunity, I have not had the opportunity to get to the museum yet. I'm hoping to, and believe me, I will contact you, and I want to hear the places that you said, I did this and I did this and I did that, because I know what that's like. But I want to thank everybody for participating, for coming this afternoon to this program. Those of you who might be interested, I'll be offering another Holocaust class through OLLI. I'm currently doing one on anti-Semitism. So you have the opportunity through OLLI to get more information about that. And if you get the opportunity, if you've not been, go visit the Holocaust Museum in Washington. It will hit you. It should hit your heart and your head. And that's what we try to do in education. So thank everybody for coming. Aleisa, thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. It's been a real pleasure and an honor to be part of this. So thank you.
Thank you.